This video covers a sensitive topic involving loss of life, so we've removed all graphic content to meet YouTube's guidelines. Poppy Iris Worthington was born at Furnace General Hospital on October 12, 2011. She lived in a town called Barrow in Furness over in Cumbria, England. Now, her father was Paul Worthington, but her mother's name hasn't been shared publicly for, legal reasons. Poppy's mom already had 3 daughters from a previous relationship. Then in 2009, she got together with Paul, which resulted in 3 more children. This new family included Poppy plus her twin brother. Family, friends, they all remembered Poppy as this beautiful, happy baby. I mean, she was often described as alert, very sociable. Her mother described her as just very alive, bubbly, funny. Poppy was a good sleeper too, following a routine of a couple naps during the day, finished with a regular bedtime around 7:30 p.m. At bedtime, Poppy liked having a bottle as she settled down to sleep. Also, she never went to bed without her pink elephant pillow. Her mom explained that Poppy would lie on her tummy right on top of that pink elephant pillow when she was sleeping. Poppy was kind of known as the family's alarm clock because she'd reliably wake up early between 5:30 or 6 in the morning, ready to start the day with all this energy. The thing is, Poppy wouldn't cry when she woke up. Instead, her morning routine was to rattle her bottle against the sides of her cot, then call out for her mom, basically letting the whole house know she was up, ready to play. Even though Poppy was considered the baby of the family, she didn't lack for playmates. Her 3 older half-sisters doted on her, while her slightly older twin brother was her companion in mischief. Poppy was generally healthier than her twin, so she needed fewer doctor's visits than he did. Aside from a brief hospitalization for bronchitis when she was maybe 3 months old, plus about a conjunctivitis later on, Poppy hadn't really had any serious health issues. Believe me, this becomes an incredibly important fact to remember as Poppy's story continues. Okay, so Poppy's mother had faced some significant hardships in her own upbringing, even spent time in foster care because of family violence. But from what reports say, she seemed to be a competent mother coping with a rapidly growing family. And although, to be fair, she probably could have benefited from more support, maybe some help from social services, given her background. Poppy's father, Paul, was around 40 years old when he started a relationship with her 23-year-old mother. He worked in a supermarket, but not much is really known about his earlier life, though reports did reveal he was known to the police. Officials also later admitted they knew, pretty much nothing about Paul when it came to assessing his role as a parent. The relationship between Poppy's parents was reportedly on again, off again. They were not married, so by 2012, they may have been more like ex-partners co-parenting than a stable couple. Poppy's mother mentioned that sometimes Paul lived in the house with the family, but other times he did not. For instance, there was a time where Paul had custody of Poppy for a while. Then he returned her to her mother's care in the summer, which kind of implies the parents were separated during that period. But according to Poppy's mom, the family had future plans to move to a new town to make a fresh start, plus those plans included Paul. After Poppy with her brother were born, the family moved into a modest 3-bedroom rented house that actually belonged to Paul's sister, Tracy Worthington. It had a living room, a kitchen downstairs, then 3 bedrooms plus 1 bathroom upstairs. So Poppy's mother plus Paul shared the master bedroom, which had a double bed, but her mother often chose to sleep downstairs on the sofa. In that master bedroom, 2 travel cots were set up for the 2 youngest boys, Poppy's twin brother, also her 2-year-old brother. Poppy herself slept in a cot in one of the other bedrooms. She'd sometimes share that room with one of her older sisters, while the remaining 2 girls shared the 3rd bedroom together. So by 2012, Poppy was toddling about, standing on her own 2 feet for the first time. Her mother said Poppy liked her food, but could be a little picky about it. Like a lot of young children, Poppy had some digestive issues. These issues concerned her mother enough that she consulted a pediatrician, but they were usually minor, passing within a day or 2. Then, in the summer of 2012, in the early winter of 2012, Poppy suffered a broken leg. At the time, the injury went untreated. Either the family didn't seek medical care, or they didn't even realize how bad the injury was. There was also just no record of any accident that could explain how a child as young as Poppy could have broken her leg. All right, so in early December of 2012, a lot of people in the house were suffering from flu-like symptoms. Poppy herself had come down with what seemed like a bad cold around the 11th. She had a runny nose, plus she was more lethargic than usual. Her mother noted that Poppy slept longer than normal during her afternoon nap that day, even had to be woken up, which was unusual for her. Poppy also had a slight fever, so her mother asked Paul to give her a dose of paracetamol, what we in the States would call acetaminophen or Tylenol. Despite feeling unwell, Poppy did eat a bit of lunch, then tea that day, so whatever was bothering her didn't seem to be too severe. However, in the late afternoon, Poppy's mother said she threw herself back in her high chair, just screamed out in pain like she had a sudden stomachache. Her mother thought that Poppy might have needed to use the bathroom, so she picked Poppy up from her high chair, rubbing her belly. She then changed Poppy, noticed evidence of digestive issues. According to her mother, Poppy was all right after that, was playing, even socializing again that evening. Poppy's mother went out briefly in the late afternoon to pick up one of the older children from school, leaving Poppy at home with Paul, plus one of his friends who had stopped by to visit. After returning, she put Poppy into her pajamas, then set her into a cot in one of the bedrooms with her bottle, also her pink elephant pillow. Sometime around 8:45 p.m., Poppy's brother woke up crying, so Paul comforted him. Afterwards, he stayed in the master bedroom for a bit, played on the computer in bed for a time. Paul said he went to bed around 9:30 p.m., taking his laptop to bed with him. He later admitted that he would typically check football results, then spend about 10 minutes looking at what he called X-rated adult stuff online before going to sleep. Poppy's mother stayed downstairs. Eventually, the mother brought the 2-year-old boy upstairs to bed too, placing him in his cot in the master bedroom, after which she herself went downstairs to sleep on the couch. In the early hours of December 12th, Poppy's mother briefly came upstairs to the master bedroom. She woke Paul up between, 2:15 or 2:30 a.m. because she wanted to use the laptop, needed a charger for it. She also noticed that Poppy's twin brother had a stuffy nose, so she decided to take the boy downstairs with her so he could sleep in his stroller. Her thinking was it would help clear his nose. Paul, who was half asleep, later claimed he couldn't fully remember this interaction, but he didn't dispute that it happened. Sometime between 5:30 or 5:45 a.m., Poppy woke up crying. In one of Paul's earlier accounts, she woke up 15 minutes before her usual time, while in one of his later accounts, he said it was nearly an hour early. Poppy's cry was described as a scream that sounded urgent, very distressed. Both parents claimed to immediately wake up upon hearing her. According to Paul, he got out of bed, then went to Poppy's room to see what was wrong. He found Poppy in her cot, sitting up on her knees in the dark, so he wasn't sure if she had a nightmare or was in pain. Paul then took her out of her cot, bringing her into the master bedroom to his own bed. At this point, he did something different from the usual routine. Normally, he would have taken Poppy downstairs to change her so she wouldn't wake up the other kids. Poppy's mother would later insist that Poppy had never been taken into her parents' bed before. Paul stated his reason for doing this was that he wanted to comfort Poppy to figure out what was wrong with her. He picked up her pacifier, also her bottle, from the cot as he carried Poppy to his bed. Look, much of what we're going to discuss next comes from Paul's own accounts. In the master bedroom, Paul sat on the edge of the bed with Poppy as he tried to calm her down. Even after he sat down with her on his knees, she was clenching her teeth, wouldn't take the pacifier when he tried to put it in her mouth. Paul claimed he thought she might be constipated. He claimed that Poppy was pushing down in his lap, which he interpreted as her straining. Acting on that assumption, Paul said he partially undid the snaps of Poppy's onesie, then checked her diaper. According to Paul, he observed evidence of digestive issues but didn't find it unusual due to past issues, plus her flu-like symptoms. Now, I know it might seem odd that we keep noting this, but it will become important later, just like the fact that Poppy really didn't have any health issues prior to 2012. Paul claimed that Poppy had stopped screaming, seemed relaxed in his own words, so he placed her in the bed on her back. Afterwards, he allegedly left Poppy there for a moment to go fetch a fresh diaper. Because it was dark so early, he said he did not turn on the bedroom light, not wanting to wake the other children in the house. Paul said that he took precautions to prevent Poppy from rolling off the bed. He placed her head on a pillow, then put another pillow on one side of her, a quilt on the other side. When Paul returned to the master bedroom, Poppy was very still, very silent. He thought perhaps she had fallen asleep in the short time he was gone. Not wanting to disturb her, he decided that instead of immediately putting her back into her own cot, he would let her sleep a little longer. Paul claimed he chose not to change her, decided to lay back down next to her in bed, intending to doze off for just a few more minutes. A short time later, maybe only 5 to 10 minutes after Paul had gone back to bed, he reached over to touch Poppy, immediately sensed something was wrong. He said that he didn't know what made him reach out to touch her, but when he did, her arm was limp, and he found Poppy completely unresponsive. She was lying in the same position he had left her, but now her little arms were floppy. She wasn't moving or making a sound. Panicking, he tapped her face gently, calling her name, but got no response. It was at this point that Paul began shouting in panic. Around 5:56 a.m., Poppy's mother heard Paul suddenly thundering down the stairs with something in his arms. He cried out to the mother to call for an ambulance. On the recording, Poppy's mother can be heard desperately trying to convey what is happening, saying how her child isn't breathing, has turned blue. The operator instructed the mother to relay CPR directions to Paul. Within minutes, an ambulance crew, police too, arrived. Paramedics found Paul performing CPR as her mother stood by, sobbing, pleading for her child to wake up. The paramedics took over resuscitation efforts, quickly prepared to transport Poppy to the hospital. Paul climbed into the ambulance with his daughter, left with the paramedics for Furnace General Hospital at about 6:11 a.m. Poppy's mother was initially left behind at the house with the other children, also the responding police officers. The Cumbria police did not secure the house as a potential crime scene. Poppy's Aunt Tracy had arrived at the house shortly after the ambulance left to help with the other children. Police on the scene also did not immediately seize bedding or the pajama bottoms Poppy had been wearing. Those items too went missing in the shuffle. During the ambulance ride, paramedics continued CPR plus advanced life support measures on Poppy. Medical staff worked on her for some time, but there was unfortunately nothing that they could do. Poppy Worthington was pronounced dead at the hospital on December 12, 2012. The exact recorded time of death was around 7:20 a.m. But Poppy had likely died at home or en route despite the efforts that were being made. All the children were removed from the parents' care within 24 hours of Poppy's death, as is standard when one child dies in suspicious circumstances. Cumbria police did not properly investigate Poppy's death for a full 9 months following the incident. Initially, a detective with a team were assigned, but they did not treat it with any urgency. A later Independent Police Complaints Commission inquiry identified at least 12 major errors or omissions in the handling of the case. Among these were failing to secure the scene, failing to preserve or test items like the bedding, blanket, pillow that might have DNA or fluids, failing to seize the laptop, the mobile phones for forensic analysis, not promptly interviewing key witnesses. Paul himself was not formally interviewed or arrested on the day of Poppy's death, despite him being the lone adult that was present with her. One factor might have been that one doctor initially didn't find a cause of death. It was listed as undetermined, pending further tests, leading some officers to mistakenly think that there might not be a case here. But Dr. Armory's suspicions of SA were known, so as you might be well aware, prosecutors can file charges based on a coroner's findings. It's hard to justify inaction here by anything else except for systemic failure. 8 months later, in August of 2013, the police finally took decisive action. They arrested both Paul, Poppy's mother, formally interviewing them. Paul was arrested on suspicion of SAing his daughter, an allegation which he vehemently denied. Poppy's mother was also arrested, though details were not made public. Both were released on bail as the investigation continued. The case then proceeded on 2 parallel tracks, one in the criminal justice system, another in the family court system. No criminal charges were immediately filed in 2013. Cumbria police eventually handed the case over to the Crown Prosecution Service after completing what investigation they could. In March of 2015, the Crown Prosecution Service announced that they would not charge anyone in relation to Poppy's death. The reason given was lack of sufficient evidence to have a realistic prospect of conviction, largely due to the botched investigation that failed to get any forensic evidence. However, parallel inquiries, parallel proceedings were shedding more light. In March of 2014, then again in November of 2015, a high court judge, Mr. Justice Peter Jackson, held fact-finding hearings to determine what happened to Poppy as part of care proceedings for the surviving children. These family court hearings are civil, using a lower burden of proof. Initially, the details were kept secret due to reporting restrictions, but eventually parts were made public. In January of 2016, Justice Jackson found, on the balance of probabilities, that Paul had saved Poppy shortly before she died.
The investigation went into suspended animation for a period of 7 months. That was wholly unacceptable. The job of the police is to, in a timely and effective way, collect the evidence and see where the evidence takes it.
This family court ruling didn't send Paul to jail because family courts cannot convict criminals, but it did bring the case into public awareness. Once revealed, the public outcry was enormous. Facing vilification as the alleged perpetrator, Paul actually fled abroad in January of 2016, right after the judgment was made public. His sister told reporters that Paul left the country due to death threats, harassment. Community members threatened vigilante justice. He was described as being in hiding hundreds of miles away, fearing for his life. Paul maintained his innocence through his sister. He complained that the authorities had failed him by destroying evidence that might have exonerated him. Paul's sister, Tracy, stood by him, asserting that he had doted on those children, would never harm them. Tracy said if she believed that he was guilty, she would not protect him, that she truly believed that he was innocent.
He wouldn't know his children. He lived with me for 2 years and looked after my kids. Do you think he'd still be walking this planet if I thought he was a paedophile? No, he wouldn't, because I'd make sure he wasn't. I've got 2 girls, and trust me, he isn't like that. And you can get your stories off everybody around here. His mates are standing behind him, so nobody else counts.
Have you spoken to Paul, your brother?
Yeah.
What's his reaction?
What do you mean, what's his reaction? He's devastated. He hasn't done out and he's been accused of something as horrendous as this. Paul can't prove that because it's done in a family court and the police have thrown the evidence away. So how's he supposed to prove anything different, because it's all got to be crossed and dotted? T's and I's got to be crossed and dotted before a family court will overrule. No, they won't overrule, because all the evidence has been thrown away by the police. There was no blood in that nappy. I picked that nappy up and I put that nappy in the bin. And I told the police in the house, because I was at the house on the morning, where's all this so-called blood? There was no blood in the house. So
what's your reaction to the police investigation here?
Well, there you go. That's my reaction. It's a joke, an absolute joke. It's been a joke from start to finish. You're talking, this has been going on for 3 years.
Will Paul Worthington come out and speak to the media?
He's not even in this town. He's gone. He had to leave because of all the persecution over Facebook, because of what the press have actually wrote already, because of the information they've gone on.
How do you think Poppy Worthington died?
I don't know. They didn't do the autopsy right, did they? They didn't do it till late. They've lost all the evidence. Nobody knows how she died.
The pathologist is clear that in her opinion, Poppy suffered a serious sexual assault.
No, she didn't. No, she didn't. You read the rest of the paperwork, which obviously isn't released to you, and it isn't that at all.
Dr. Armour was clear in her professional opinion. She suffered a serious sexual assault.
I don't care what Dr. Armour said and what she thinks. We know different. She didn't. And
is your brother a child abuser?
No, he's not. If he was a child abuser, do you think I'd let him walk? No, because I don't like him myself. So you really think I would back him up if I thought he was a child abuser?
Is he a danger still on these streets?
Is he? Don't be stupid. Talking pathetic now.
Given the lack of criminal charges, the coroner decided to hold a full inquest into Poppy's death as another route to establish the truth. The second inquest took place in late 2017, with senior coroner David Roberts presiding. The inquest called dozens of witnesses over 3 weeks, including paramedics, doctors, social workers, both of Poppy's parents. Notably, Paul was compelled to give evidence at the coroner's inquest, though he was allowed to do so from behind a screen to shield him from the public. When he took the stand in November of 2017, Paul refused to answer questions 252 times, repeatedly invoking his right not to incriminate himself. Every question about what happened that night was met with silence or a statement of no comment. Poppy's mother felt his non-answers frustrated the inquest search for the truth. The coroner noted that Paul's earlier accounts did not stand up to scrutiny, were inconsistent or unlikely in many respects. One puzzling detail was that Poppy's pink elephant pillow, her favorite comfort item that always stayed in her cot, was found on the double bed in Paul's room afterwards. Paul claimed he had no idea how that pillow got into his bed. Investigators suspect he might have grabbed it to silence her during the essay. Also, a bottle of milk was later found lying on the bed with a damp patch of milk on the sheet, indicating that Poppy had been in bed long enough for a bottle to spill, contrary to Paul's timeline. Poppy's mother also stated that there was a partially unraveled roll of paper towels on the bed, something that they never kept in the bedroom to begin with. Additionally, Poppy's pajama bottoms could not be seen in any of the pictures taken that day. Her mother stated that she tried very hard to search for them at home, but she has never found them since. Paul argued these words went too far for a standard inquest. He claimed that because the essay itself hadn't directly caused Poppy's death, it shouldn't be part of the formal record explaining how she died. He seemed motivated by the fact that this record would be permanent, would be commonly referenced by the public in regards to the case. The court reviewing his complaint rejected it outright. It ruled that the coroner was right to include the essay in the inquest record because it explained why Poppy was placed in an unsafe sleeping position that led to her death. The court found nothing unlawful about recording those facts, emphasizing that an inquest has a duty to lay out the full circumstances surrounding a death when the public interest demands it. However, the coroner, constrained by legal standards, recorded the cause of death in a narrative form rather than labeling it unlawful killing because he could not be sure beyond a reasonable doubt whether the death was murder or manslaughter. He did emphasize that there was no natural cause to explain Poppy's death, that no one else could have been responsible except the adult with her at the time. The public inquest verdict added pressure on the Crown Prosecution Service to reconsider the charges against Paul. The coroner himself took the unusual step of formally sending his findings to the Crown Prosecution Service for review, given the gravity of the conclusions. Poppy's mother, through her lawyer, made an impassioned plea that after all these years, 3 court findings, the agency should take another look, try to prosecute Paul. However, in January of 2018, the Crown Prosecution Service announced it had no plans to prosecute Paul, essentially standing by its earlier decision due to insufficient evidence. They reiterated that without any new evidence, a prosecution would not succeed. Poppy's mother was disappointed. She expressed through her lawyer that the past 5 years have been a complete nightmare. Despite this, she has shown courage in pushing for accountability. She said she is relieved to finally have some answers after the 2018 inquest is closer to the truth, even though that truth is devastating. As of the date of this recording, in July of 2025, Paul Worthington remains a free man. His whereabouts are completely unknown to the public, and he has never been charged or convicted with anything related to Poppy's essay or death.